Hello, my name is Nick Heasters. I am the Senior Advisor for Cybersecurity for the Health Information, Privacy, Data, and Cybersecurity Division for the HHS Office for Civil Rights. OCR is the federal agency responsible for administering and enforcing the HIPAA rules. This is the set of rules that applies to protected health information and sets forth the privacy and security requirements that HIPAA-covered entities and business associates must follow, as well as the rights that individuals have, such as the right to access their health information. We do this through rulemaking and guidance, investigations and enforcement actions, and outreach, like today's presentation. My statements today are intended to be for educational purposes and should not be construed as legal advice, an advisory opinion, or a modification or addendum to the HIPAA rules, OCR's statutory authority, or any published materials by OCR, such as our bulletins, guidance, or notifications. Please visit our website at HHS.gov/OCR for all of OCR's HIPAA-related published materials. Today, in observation of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we will discuss how HIPAA security rule can defend against cyber attacks. First, we will review the trends that OCR sees in large breaches that are reported annually to OCR. Next, we will review common HIPAA compliance issues that have caused or contributed to breaches of PHI with a focus on common attack vectors as seen by OCR in its investigations. Then, we will review HIPAA security rule provisions that, if implemented, can help prevent, detect, mitigate, and recover from security incidents and breaches. Next, we will answer selected questions. Prior to producing this video, OCR sent out a listserv announcement seeking questions from the public and regulated entities for this webinar. So let me say thank you to all who submitted questions, as it helps us understand what are some current issues that would benefit from additional clarity. We will end with a review of various HIPAA and cybersecurity resources from OCR that can assist regulated entities with their compliance program and protection of PHI. I wanted to start out by highlighting the types of large breaches reported to OCR over the past 5 years and note how that has changed. Large breaches are breaches of unsecured protected health information affecting 500 or more individuals. The pie chart on the left represents reports of large breaches by breach type cumulatively from September 2009 through December 2022. Almost half, 49%, are attributed to hacking and IT incidents, but almost a quarter, 22%, were because of theft or loss. The chart on the right shows large breach report data for this year, from January through September of 2023. Here we can see significant differences from the historical data. Hacking and IT incidents make up 77% of the large breaches reported to OCR, and theft, which used to be far more common as a type of large breach, is only 2%. The big takeaway from this data is that a hacking breach is the most common type of large breach that a regulated entity is likely to experience. This is consistent with what OCR observed last year, where hacking was about 79% of the large breaches reported to OCR in 2022. This slide illustrates the progression, an increase of large breaches attributed to hacking and IT incidents over the past 5 years. There has been a 239% increase in large breaches reported to OCR involving hacking from 2018 to 2022. For ransomware, it's a 278% increase for the same time frame. This is the largest cybersecurity threat facing the healthcare industry and the protected health information it holds. When I started at OCR and reviewed incoming large breach reports, many were due to lost or stolen devices. The email summaries I would receive would read something like, "The CE reports that a laptop containing PHI was stolen from an employee's vehicle," or "The CE reports a mobile device containing PHI was stolen while an employee was traveling." I don't come across as many stolen or lost device breach reports as before. Hopefully, part of that reason is a greater understanding of the risk to PHI on highly mobile devices, but also that entities are taking advantage of available encryption technologies to better protect PHI. Unfortunately, these lost and stolen summaries have been replaced by summaries stating that the CE discovered that its computer system was hacked during a cyber attack involving an email phishing scheme, or the BA discovered that its network server was hacked during a cyber attack involving ransomware. This slide illustrates the breach type and summary columns from emails regarding newly reported breaches. Next, I want to look at where reported large breaches are occurring. Again, the pie chart on the left shows cumulative data from 2009 through December 31st, 2022. Here we see that network servers at 31% and email at 21% are the largest locations, and paper records are not far behind at 17%. In the pie chart to the right, for 2023 to date, we can see that network servers are even more dominant for large breaches at 67%, and a slight drop in email at 18%, and paper records reduced at 5%. In sum, network servers and email accounted for 85% of the large breaches reported to OCR this year. It should be a surprise to no one in the healthcare sector that by a wide margin, the majority of large breaches reported to OCR are due to hacking and IT incidents. Again, the charts on the previous slides illustrate that OCR has seen a 239% increase in large breaches reported due to hacking and IT incidents from 2018 to 2022. Large breach reports due to ransomware, a specific type of hacking IT incident, rose 278% from 2018 to 2022. This is the primary cybersecurity issue for the HIPAA-regulated industry. OCR investigations find some commonality in breaches resulting from successful cyber attacks. Perhaps unsurprisingly, successful phishing attacks, attacks leveraging compromised credentials, and exploitation of unpatched vulnerabilities play a role in the initial attack vector or for a subsequent step to elevate privileges, access sensitive data, including PHI, and deploy malware. The remainder of this video will take a closer look at results of OCR's investigations and analysis of cyber attacks and how security rules safeguards can help regulated entities prevent, defend, mitigate, and recover from cyber attacks. This infographic illustrates the steps of a typical ransomware attack. First, the intrusion or infiltration by the attacker, either directly or via malware, followed by lateral movement and reconnaissance, typically looking for vulnerabilities and locations of sensitive data, including PHI. Next, sensitive data is exfiltrated, usually to blackmail the affected entity into paying a ransom by threatening to publicly release the exfiltrated data. But the attacker may also seek additional payment by posting the data for sale on dark web forums once exfiltrated. The data is encrypted to deny access. And finally, a ransom demand is made. The previous infographic largely mirrors what OCR's investigations of breaches as a result of a cyber attack reveal. That is, the attack begins with an attacker gaining access to a non-admin account. This is sometimes due to compromised credentials or a successful phishing attack that captures credentials or deposits malware. The non-admin account, now under the attacker's control, is used for reconnaissance and to deploy tools to discover vulnerabilities. Next, the attacker elevates privileges by exploiting vulnerabilities to compromise an administrator account, such as a local or domain administrator or the root user of a Unix or Linux system. Finally, the attacker exfiltrates sensitive data, including EPHI, deletes backups, and deploys malware, typically ransomware, but may include backdoors to try and maintain access to compromised systems when discovered. We will now review these steps in greater detail. An attacker can gain a foothold in an organization's information systems through a variety of means. A popular vector is leveraging compromised credentials to access a system remotely. This slide illustrates excerpts of findings from investigations and OCR's analysis related to regulated entities implementing poor authentication schemes. Here are examples of minimum password lengths of 4 and 5 characters with at least one domain policy requiring no password complexity. That is, it did not enforce requiring a combination of numbers, upper and lowercase characters, and or special characters. A popular password strength chart estimates that passwords with a length of 4 or 5 characters, regardless of complexity, can be cracked using brute force methods almost instantly. In addition to password length, poor passwords generally were found in various investigations, including passwords that were the same as the user ID, oftentimes on service or application accounts, such as a test or software account. For example, the user ID of test or dbadmin would be configured with the passwords of test and dbadmin respectively. Default passwords were also observed, such as those that come pre-configured on devices for administration and configuration. Some investigations found entity default passwords in use that were included in manuals available on the internet or circulating online in hacker forums. Entities using anonymous FTP, a configuration of the file transfer protocol requiring no authentication, was also identified during several investigations. At least one entity relied on anonymous FTP for clients to upload logs for software diagnosis, but these logs contained PHI. The HIPAA security rule includes a requirement for authentication, implemented procedures to verify that a person or entity seeking access to EPHI is the one claimed. Authentication, like all HIPAA security rule safeguards, must be implemented in accordance with the security rules general rules located in Title 45, Section 164.306 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The general rules state, among other things, that HIPAA-covered entities and business associates must ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all EPHI they create, receive, maintain, or transmit. So, when implementing security rule safeguards, such implementations must be done in accordance with the general rules. Or, put another way, the safeguards that are implemented must ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all EPHI. From the previous slide, access to EPHI with no authentication via anonymous FTP, or even with authentication but using weak authentication rules and solutions such as 4 or 5 character passwords, does not ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of EPHI. In June of 2023, OCR published a cybersecurity newsletter going over many aspects of authentication and HIPAA's authentication requirements. I encourage people to review the full newsletter if they have not already, but I just wanted to highlight some information from the newsletter. First is that regulated entities should assess the risk that different touch points of authentication pose to EPHI. Risks for remote access to EPHI or to elevate privileges to an administrator account that can bypass access controls protecting EPHI may be higher than risks posed by employees authenticating locally to non-administrator accounts. An entity's authentication solution should take these differences into account and implement solutions that can reduce these risks sufficiently to ensure the protection of EPHI. Implementations of multi-factor authentication are discussed in the newsletter as an example of a solution that may be effective at reducing higher risk authentication scenarios. The newsletter also discusses the need for regulated entities to consider authentication touchpoints other than only those that grant access to systems. The ability to access administrator privileges or administrative tools such as storage or virtual machine management tools also pose risks to EPHI that need to be identified and addressed. Phishing is another common vector used by attackers to gain initial access to an environment. The phishing attacks OCR has investigated usually are one of two types. The phishing email includes malicious attachments that attempt to trick someone into opening them so that malware is deployed, or the phishing email includes a link to a malicious website impersonating a legitimate website for purposes of capturing credentials, someone's user ID and password. This slide includes examples of phishing emails OCR has encountered in its investigations. One, purportedly sent from the company's president, urges employees to click on the link to access an important document, and the other includes a link purportedly to an employee survey but goes to a fake survey at a malicious site. There are multiple types of phishing campaigns. Spear phishing involves sending phishing emails to specific persons in an organization. Often, these are tailored to specifically fool targeted individuals. This slide includes an excerpt from an OCR investigation illustrating the effects of a successful spear phishing campaign disguised as a notification for a required software update. The successful attack allowed an attacker to gain control of computer systems, move laterally throughout the entity's environment, harvest passwords, and elevate privileges, a very common cyber attack scenario. An entity's workforce should be educated about the dangers of phishing. An educated workforce can be an effective first line of defense and an integral part of a HIPAA-regulated entity's strategy to defend against phishing attacks. The security rule requires HIPAA-regulated entities to implement a security awareness and training program for all members of its workforce, including management. As previously mentioned, all of the security rules, administrative, physical, and technical safeguards, including the Security Awareness and Training Standard, must be implemented in accordance with Section 164.306 to, among other things, ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all EPHI. Thus, a regulated entity's security awareness and training program should be an ongoing, evolving process and be flexible enough to educate workforce members on new and current cybersecurity threats such as ransomware and phishing and how to respond. For example, educating workforce members on what to do if they encounter a suspicious email, and where to report their suspicions. Regulated entities also need to address security reminders as part of their security awareness and training program. As an addressable implementation specification, regulated entities enjoy wide latitude on how they choose to address this. One suggestion to address this that can aid workforce education is simulated phishing emails. Security reminders could include sending simulated phishing emails to workforce members to gauge the effectiveness of its security awareness and training program, and offer additional targeted training to workforce members that do not properly identify and report the simulated phishing emails as suspicious. OCR's first quarter 2022 cybersecurity newsletter about defending against common cyber attacks includes additional details on phishing and how regulated entities can use training to combat them. In addition to training, the first quarter 2022 newsletter also discusses the use of anti-phishing technologies that can impede or deny the introduction of malware from phishing attacks. Combining an engaged, educated workforce with appropriate technical solutions can provide regulated entities the best opportunity to reduce or prevent phishing attacks. Once an attacker gains foothold in an entity's environment, OCR's investigations show that typical actions of the attacker are to conduct reconnaissance activities to explore the entity's computer systems and networks, searching for means such as the exploitation of vulnerabilities to gain access to administrator accounts. Oftentimes, attackers will deploy tools to scan networks searching for known vulnerabilities to exploit. This slide includes excerpts from OCR investigations that identify successful cyber attacks that lacked security measures that could have impeded or otherwise contained an attacker's activities. For example, one investigation identified a lack of permissions or access controls where a PHI was located, thereby allowing access to PHI to everyone. A couple of investigations identified a lack of network segmentation that could make networks and systems more accessible to an attacker by not impeding lateral movement. Ineffective or non-existent access control lists was also identified as a means that could make access to PHI easier for an attacker. The blue excerpt illustrates the common cyber attack pattern OCR sees in its investigations. Once access is gained, the attacker uses tools to perform reconnaissance, map the network, identify vulnerabilities, gain access to administrator credentials, and deploy ransomware. OCR investigations have revealed PHI left unprotected without access controls in many situations, including on FTP servers, web servers, in temporary directories or folders, in collaboration tools, and on shared drives. Effective access controls are vitally important to protect ePHI. As with all security rule safeguards, access controls must be implemented in a manner to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all ePHI. The access control standard requires HIPAA-regulated entities to implement technical policies and procedures for electronic information systems that maintain ePHI to allow access only to those persons or software programs that have been granted access rights as specified in 164.308A4. Section 164.308A4 is the Information Access Management Standard. This is the administrative process by which access to ePHI is granted. OCR published a cybersecurity newsletter in 2021 focusing on the security rules authorization and access control requirements. This newsletter highlighted that access controls could include various solutions such as role-based access, users-based access, attribute-based access, or any other access control mechanisms a regulated entity deems appropriate to ensure the protection of its EPHI. Access controls need not be limited to computer systems. Firewalls, network segmentation, and network access controls can also be effective means to limit access to EPHI. Properly implemented, network-based solutions can limit the ability of an attacker to gain access to a regulated entity's network or impede the ability of an attacker already in the network from accessing other information systems, including systems containing EPHI. After conducting reconnaissance to discover sensitive data and system vulnerabilities, OCR investigations show that an attacker would next exploit a vulnerability to gain access to administrative privileges. This can happen in a number of ways. An administrative account's credentials can be compromised. Password harvesting tools may successfully yield access to administrative credentials. Or an unpatched vulnerability could be exploited that elevates privileges to an administrator's level. This slide includes excerpts from OCR investigations showing an attacker's ability to elevate privileges. A SQL injection attack, which is an attack inserting malicious code into an application which allows the attacker to view or alter a database, provided access to a user table, which provided access to an administrator's password, which was able to be decrypted. Multiple vulnerabilities were present that could be exploited to gain administrator access to a server, and an unpatched vulnerability of a network protocol could be exploited to elevate privileges. The security rule requires regulated entities to implement a security management process that includes requirements for risk analysis and risk management processes. The risk analysis provision requires regulated entities to conduct an accurate and thorough assessment of the potential risks and vulnerabilities to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of EPHI held by the regulated entity. Risk management requires implementation of security measures sufficient to reduce risks and vulnerabilities to a reasonable and appropriate level to comply with Section 164.306A. As we have seen previously, these requirements, as with all safeguards, must be implemented in a manner to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all EPHI. OCR's investigations frequently find non-compliant risk analysis and risk management processes as a leading cause or contributing factor in many breaches. The risk analysis must be accurate and thorough and consider risks to all of the EPHI held by the regulated entity. A frequent area of deficiency OCR finds in risk analyses is a lack of thoroughness. That is, only a subset of a regulated entity's environment was considered for risks posed to EPHI, or there was a lack of comprehensiveness when considering the risks, technical vulnerabilities posed to EPHI. Identifying, assessing, and managing risks to EPHI can be difficult, especially in organizations that have a large, complex technology footprint. Understanding one's environment, particularly how EPHI is created and enters an organization, how EPHI flows through an organization, and how EPHI leaves an organization, is crucial to understanding the risks EPHI is exposed to throughout one's organization. In 2020, OCR published a cybersecurity newsletter describing the benefits a robust inventory management process can have for a regulated entity's risk analysis and risk management obligations. OCR's first quarter 2022 cybersecurity newsletter on defending against common cyber attacks included a discussion regarding technical vulnerabilities. Technical vulnerabilities could include holes, flaws, or weaknesses of information systems, such as unpatched known vulnerabilities or incorrectly implemented and/or configured information systems. The newsletter suggested various means that could be used to assist a regulated entity in identifying technical vulnerabilities, including subscribing to Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency alerts, participating in an information sharing and analysis center, implementing a vulnerability management program that includes vulnerability scanning to detect obsolete software and missing patches, and periodically conducting penetration tests to identify weaknesses that could be exploited by an attacker. Once risks and vulnerabilities are identified, assessed, and prioritized, appropriate measures need to be taken to mitigate these vulnerabilities. For example, applying patches, hardening systems by disabling or removing unnecessary software or services, and replacing obsolete equipment. Once the attacker in our example scenario has gained access to administrator-level privileges, the final steps OCR typically sees includes the exfiltration of sensitive data, including EPHI, removing of online backups to impede recovery efforts, and deploying ransomware to encrypt data. This slide includes excerpts of OCR's investigations involving exfiltrated PHI from picture archiving and communications systems, or PAC servers, attackers deleting or encrypting online backups, entities paying a ransom because backups were not available, and deployed ransomware encrypting EPHI, including medical and billing records. Because of ransomware's ability to deny access to the data it encrypts, a regulated entity's security incident response and data backup and restore processes are critical to halting and eradicating malware, including ransomware, and restoring data to continue business as usual operations. OCR's October 2022 cybersecurity newsletter on HIPAA security rules, security incident procedures reviews a regulated entity's obligations to implement policies and procedures to address security incidents, including obligations to identify and respond to suspected or known security incidents, mitigating, to the extent practicable, the harmful effects of security incidents known to the regulated entity, and documenting security incidents and their outcomes, determining the nature and extent of the damage caused by a security incident, identifying and removing any malicious code and components that a security incident may have left behind, and mitigating any vulnerabilities that may have permitted a security incident to occur are all important steps regulated entities can consider when developing their security incident response procedures. In addition to security incident response, the October 2022 newsletter also reviews a regulated entity's obligations to create and maintain retrievable exact copies of EPHI as required by the Security Rules Data Backup Plan Implementation Specification. Because ransomware denies access to data, including PHI, maintaining frequent backups and ensuring the ability to recover data from backups is crucial to recovering from a ransomware attack. Test restorations can be periodically conducted and backup logs reviewed to verify the integrity of backed up data and provide confidence in a regulated entity's data restoration capabilities. Because some ransomware variants have been known to remove or encrypt online backups, regulated entities should consider maintaining some backups offline and unavailable from their networks. This concludes the video's review of how the HIPAA security rule can help defend against cyber attacks. The video referred frequently to topics addressed in OCR's cybersecurity newsletters. For those of you interested in learning more about how best practices for HIPAA compliance can help defend against cyber attacks, I encourage you to visit OCR's website and review the cybersecurity newsletter materials. OCR solicited questions for this video presentation, and I will address some of those now. The first question is about authentication. We want to know if the authentication methods for covered entities are going to be defined. if HIPAA is ambiguous regarding specific controls and now proven vastly effective, when would authentication methods such as multiple factor authentication be defined to suffice failure to implement an authentication process to safeguard EPHI? We talked a little about authentication as part of this video, and OCR published a cybersecurity newsletter dedicated to authentication in June 2023. I would refer interested people to the newsletter, as it has a lot of really good information. The security rule does not prescribe a specific method of authentication. It is interesting to note that the Notice of Public Rulemaking, or NPRM, for the security rule did prescribe methods of authentication. It required entities select a method from a list that included passwords, biometrics, and telephone callbacks. Public comments suggested more or different options, or no options at all. In the interest that the security rule follows a design principle of being flexible, scalable, and technology neutral, all of the specific authentication methods were removed in the final security rule. However, as we reviewed earlier in this video, every security rule safeguard must be implemented in a manner that ensures the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of EPHI. Authentication methods that may have been good enough 20 years ago may not be good enough today. Also, as we reviewed earlier, the specific implementation of security rule requirements should be informed by the risks and vulnerabilities to EPHI. Certain risk profiles may be higher than others, thus requiring greater protections. In your example, multi-factor authentication may well be the most appropriate authentication solution in an organization to reduce high risks posed to EPHI, such as from privileged accounts, infrastructure tools, and remote access. Another question asks, is there definitive information about healthcare professionals using cell phones for patient communication, nor telehealth sessions using platforms such as Zoom? OCR published 2 resource documents for healthcare providers and patients this month on telehealth and their risks to privacy and security. The first resource is for healthcare providers on educating patients about privacy and security risks to protected health information when using remote communication technologies for telehealth. Although healthcare providers are not required by the HIPAA rules to provide this education, the resource supports the continued and increased use of telehealth by providing information to help healthcare providers who choose to discuss telehealth privacy and security with patients. The resource provides suggestions for discussing telehealth options offered, risks to EPHI when using remote communications technologies, privacy and security practices of remote communication technology vendors, applicability of civil rights laws. OCR also issued a resource for patients called Telehealth Privacy and Security Tips for Patients. This resource provides recommendations that patients can implement to protect and secure their health information, such as conducting telehealth appointments in a private location, turning on multi-factor authentication if available, using encryption when available, avoiding public Wi-Fi networks. Please visit OCR's website to read the guidance in full. There are many options to providing telehealth through remote communication technologies, and OCR supports telehealth and the use of remote communication products that protect the privacy and security of patients' health information. Our last question is, does a covered entity or business associate need to notify the customers in case a cyber risk is averted or any preemptive measures implemented for cybersecurity? Generally, no. There is not a requirement to notify individuals of an averted cyber risk that does not rise to the level of a breach of PHI. However, the security rule provides that a business associate agreement must require the business associate to report to the covered entity or business associate whose EPHI it maintains any security incidents of which it becomes aware. The rule, however, does not prescribe the level of detail, frequency, or format of reports of security incidents which may be worked out between the parties to the business associate agreement. There is also not a requirement to notify customers of specific measures implemented for cybersecurity, but interested persons can review the HIPAA security rule to gain an understanding of the security measures covered entities and business associates are required to implement. This presentation referred frequently to OCR's cybersecurity newsletters. Recent newsletter topics include authentication, security incident procedures, defending against common cyber attacks, securing legacy systems, controlling access to EPHI, HIPAA and IT asset inventories, preventing, mitigating, and responding to ransomware, advanced persistent threats and zero-day vulnerabilities, managing malicious insider threats, and phishing. To receive cybersecurity newsletters or other HIPAA security-related information, please sign up to our listserv via our website. This slide shows various ransomware resources available from OCR, HHS, CISA, and the FBI. The HHS Health Sector Cybersecurity Coordination Center provides threat briefs that highlight relevant cybersecurity topics and raises the healthcare and public healthcare sector's situational awareness of current cyber threats, threat actors, best practices, and mitigation tactics. It gives timely, valuable information on specific ransomware attacks, sector alerts that provide high-level situational background information and context for technical and executive audiences, designed to assist the sector with defense of large-scale and high-level vulnerabilities and other products that includes quick information analyst notes and in-depth white papers which increase comprehensive cybersecurity situational awareness and provide recommendations to a wide audience. HHS Resources on Section 405D of the Cybersecurity Act of 2015 includes materials on health industry cybersecurity practices, managing threats and protecting patients. Technical Volume 1, Cybersecurity Practices for Small Healthcare Organizations. Technical Volume 2, Cybersecurity Practices for Medium and Large Healthcare Organizations, Medical Devices and Cybersecurity. OCR Resources on Ransomware, Cybersecurity, and Risk Analysis. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency ransomware materials, and FBI resources on ransomware, including information on contacting the FBI and considerations on paying a ransom. And finally, here are ways to connect with OCR on our website, how to join our privacy and security listservs, and X, formerly known as Twitter. OCR's listserv announcements provide information on recent HIPAA settlements or impositions of civil money penalties in investigations, new HIPAA guidance, proposed and final rules, future webinars, cybersecurity newsletters, and much, much more.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.